Hey everyone, welcome to Let's Talk Philippines. My name is John, and today's story is about a guy who points to one night as being the start of his Philippines downfall. Now, please feel free to skip ahead to the timestamp on screen now if you just want to listen to the story. But if you bear with me for 10 seconds or 20 seconds, I want to tell you about the direction I'm hoping to take this channel moving forwards. I currently live in Thailand, and I have my Thailand story channel, which I actually started before this one. And I've been testing out a brand new format on there, which seems to be getting some good reactions. Basically, actual on-the-ground footage of where these stories took place. I'd love to be able to do this for the Philippines as well, but obviously it's a lot more difficult to do that. I've left a link in the description to a Thailand story, which is in this format. If you want to go and check that out, tell me what you think. Would you like to see this on the Philippines channel? I believe it really adds to the stories. I believe it really adds to the experience of listening and watching the story. So your guys' feedback will be very appreciated on that. I can't promise anything. Obviously, need to get to the Philippines to do that, but I hope to be able to. Anyway, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Give the video a like, and let's get into today's story.
It's funny how there are so many days that we have to go through in our lives. Some days are good, some days are bad. But for me, I can point to one day, scratch that, one night, that was the point in time where if I didn't do what I did, perhaps I would be better off. To have to come to terms with the fact that my life, right now, is not where I want it to be is very difficult to accept, when at the time, all I was trying to do was get to a point where my life could be how I thought it was meant to be. It's kind of like a double-edged sword. I did something to try to make my life better, but all I did was make my life worse. Who would have thought that would be the case? I think I would like to rewind and talk about why the Philippines. Why was I thinking about the Philippines in the first place? Because before I'd heard of the Philippines as a retirement destination, I always thought I would forever stay at home. I was just getting on with my life like normal. There wasn't anything unusual about my life. I'd never been married, although it was something I always wanted to do, and I had a friend of mine return home from a trip around Thailand. He'd been speaking about Thailand for a long time. Probably 10 years he'd been talking about wanting to go, yet he never went. He was always trying to encourage me to go as well. He said that in a place like Thailand, guys like us might actually have a chance as opposed to being just another part of the machine, but I didn't quite buy what he was saying, and it just never really appealed to me. This was a long time ago now, in the 1990s, and my friend went to visit Thailand and returned home a changed man. Within 6 months, he'd sold everything and was moving to Thailand, and how he described Thailand was like it was some kind of utopia where the girls looked at guys like us, but not only that, wanted us. Again, when he's talking to me, I'm not really buying it. I don't believe that such a place can exist, and sure enough, 15 years later, he returned home from Thailand completely broke after losing everything. The thing was, though, how he was talking about how everything went wrong for him, he was still saying that he wished he was in Thailand. He wished he was there. He wished he was with the girl that he lost all his money to, and he wished he was in the house that he built because it was perfect. The only thing he said he wished was different was that the girl that he married was actually like she was when they first met. He said that every single time they did something together that meant he was more invested in their relationship, she would take a step back from the relationship and feel more comfortable with things, and he said that was the biggest thing that he got wrong. He thought that by meeting someone who was poor, who worked in a bar, that meant she would do everything to show her sense of gratitude to the person that took her away from that life and gave her better things. He didn't understand that other people have feelings and their own dreams. He didn't understand that she wanted what he could give her, but she wanted it her way. She wanted to be in control, and she wanted what he had, but she didn't want him. That was his mistake. His only mistake was believing that she wanted him, but if she had, everything would have been okay. That's what he said. I saw his wife on 6 different occasions because they visited the UK, obviously 6 times since he moved there, and his wife seemed sweet enough. She was very beautiful, a lot younger than he was, but the thing that made me not want to do the same thing as him was that her English ability was very marginal. Saying that, she could speak English far better than my friend could speak Thai, but that really put me off. I thought the ability to have a conversation with someone and the ability to share thoughts about things and talk about what was going on in the world was a very important part of a relationship. But my friend said that didn't matter to him. He said he'd rather it was this way because things wouldn't get complicated. They could just talk about the basic things in life, basic human needs. She was able to fulfill the role of a wife, or so he thought, and the role of a wife was exactly like he said a wife should be. I wasn't agreeing with anything he was saying. That wasn't who I was. I was for equal rights, equal opportunities for everybody, but it was the very fact that when he returned home broke, saying that he doesn't regret anything apart from that one mistake he made about his wife being his wife as opposed to the person he thought she was, that made me think that perhaps there's something to retirement in a different country. I always felt like my opinions about relationships and about girls in general meant I would have a better chance. I wasn't stuck in the past with warped views of what a marriage should be, and I thought that my attitude would give me a better chance of success. I felt like I'd been ready to retire for 5 years at this point. This was when I was 55, and I felt that ever since I turned 50. I was ready to kind of take it easy, but at home I didn't have the ability to do that. The reason I decided against Thailand was mainly because of the language barrier that I witnessed when I saw my friend and his wife. That's when I found out about the Philippines. At the time, this was before social media had developed to where it is at the moment. It wasn't as popular to go online and look at things. Of course, the internet was available, of course it was, but it became clear that the Philippines was quite similar to Thailand in terms of what you could do there and how much things cost and the girls, apart from the fact that they spoke English there. I'd resisted the urge to travel to Thailand to see my friend because I just didn't think it made sense to do that. But the Philippines opened up the possibility to do what he did, although to a country where I could speak my language and I could have proper conversations about proper things. It's funny though, how my friend's failure in Thailand and his reaction to that failure actually made me come to the conclusion that moving to the Philippines, going to have a look at the Philippines first to see if I liked it, would be the best thing. So that's exactly what I did when I was 55 in 2013. The Philippines was incredible. There's no two ways about it. It was the best place that I'd ever been to in my life. And I could understand everything that my friend was talking about Thailand because I saw it in the Philippines. I started regretting not going to Thailand because I could have probably experienced a lot of what my friend did. But I thought those thoughts and thought never mind, and I got on with the business of exploring the Philippines for the 2 weeks that I was there. I considered this to be an introduction to the country, an introduction to see if this place could be somewhere I would retire, because that's what I kept coming back to. It was just the ability to be able to retire is what attracted me to the Philippines. If I was going to go there, I would have not had to get a job because I didn't need to. I couldn't anyway because I was a foreigner, but I started to think that if I retired, I was able to do that right now, and that was so attractive for me. Was I just tricking myself or trying to convince myself? I don't know. But at the time, the thought of retiring at home wasn't exciting anymore. The thought of retiring in the Philippines was exciting. And the thing was, I had the ability to retire right there and then. That was a very eye-opening moment, and it made me understand why so many people leave where they're from in search of better places. Because if you like it, which I did, there was literally nothing stopping me from stopping work right now and beginning this brand new life. During those 2 weeks, I spent most of my time in Angeles. I did a bit in Manila as well, but Angeles was meant to be the party destination, and I was in much need of letting my hair down and having a good time. It was just so amazing to be able to be seen for a change. So amazing to be able to walk into a bar, sit down and order a drink and have your pick of the girls who would come and sit next to you and drink with you. And at the time, I felt like they looked up to you. I wasn't there to be looked up to. I wasn't that sort of person. But it really made me feel good that for once, I felt like I had a chance with the sort of girl I always thought I should have a chance with. I remember one encounter in particular. I was in a bar that wasn't on Walking Street, but it was just next to the entrance to the street. And that was a very close moment to me completely forgetting about home entirely and asking her to marry me that same evening. I didn't want to get too carried away though. I really started hating myself because I loved it so much. but not actually doing what my friend did. And again, talking back to why he was there in the first place, I was starting to feel that perhaps what he did was rubbing off on me. It made me feel like the guy I always thought I was, just by being able to be in the company of such a wonderful girl. I guess I didn't learn my lesson though based on what my friend did. Nothing happened with that girl, that's not what I was trying to say here, but what it did do was convince me that the Philippines was somewhere that I would be able to live. I wanted to do that more than anything, and I felt like I was going to do that. Back at home, I immediately quit my job. That was a very liberating experience. It was probably one of the best things I ever had the pleasure of doing. I dreamed about it and thought about it for as long as I could remember, just to get to the point in time where I could walk into my manager's office and say I quit. Not I quit because I've got a new job that's giving me more money. I quit because I'm no longer going to partake in the game that is life. I'm going to take part in a new game, which is life in a different country, where guys like me are actually respected. That was one of the best moments of my life. I never owned a house. I guess that was a big mistake, because all that money I paid in rent over the years, when I could have invested in a house, and that house could have gone up in value, could have seen me with a lot more. But there's no point looking back at things you didn't do with regret, because we can't change them. What I had, I received about 4 years before that moment. I was just adding that to what I had at home, and I felt like it wasn't enough to retire at home. I did, though, receive an inheritance of about £160,000. I added that to my savings of £30,000, and since then I'd saved another £15,000, so I was going to the Philippines with about £205,000. It was my plan to retire at home with £250,000, although it wouldn't have given me a good life, but that's what I thought would have just about been enough. But in the Philippines I felt like I had more than enough, because I saw how cheap things were there, and I saw how far your money could go there. There wasn't one single bone in my body that told me I was doing something stupid. Nothing told me it was a bad idea. Everything was pushing me towards doing this, and I'd only been back home for less than a month when I was actually flying to the Philippines as a brand new retiree to start my life. My friend actually joined me, although he was only going to be there for 2 weeks. Don't really need to talk more about my friend, but he liked the Philippines, but said that Thailand was better. He was actually leaving the Philippines to go to Thailand for another 2 weeks before returning home. All the money he earned since arriving back broke after losing everything in Thailand he spent on that trip. He obviously loved it, and I could see why. Although when I was there on holiday, I spent most of my time in Angeles and a bit in Manila, I didn't plan on living in either of those places because I knew that I could get very carried away in Angeles if I let myself. I also knew that if I was going to get into a long-term relationship with somebody, there was no way I would ever meet a girl in a bar and think it was a good idea to get into a relationship with her. I was inclined to look for a girl in a place that was more suitable. Yet, we can have the best intentions. Maybe I would join a dating site. Maybe I would run into a girl when I was out, because that was one thing that the Philippines did do for me. It gave me a bigger sense of confidence than I had before. At home, I would never have approached anybody and talked to them. But in the Philippines, it was like I wasn't an introvert anymore. I was an extrovert. But it was taken to this wild extreme. I did spend the first 2 weeks in Manila and Angeles together with my friend who wanted to experience it. But after I spent quite a lot of time when I was at home doing more research, I decided I wanted to go and visit a place called Dumaguete. It was meant to be an up-and-coming place where expats went for cheaper living and also somewhere a bit different. It's quite close to the island of Cebu, which is just north. And it was one particular review I read about it from a guy who was living there that made me think I should go and look myself. When I made it there, I really did think it was great. It was next to the ocean, which made it even better. There seemed to be a reasonable expat community there, and I felt like it would make the perfect place to live. I didn't leave that place for about 3 months. I did find somewhere to live that was very affordable. I made some friends with other expats, and I managed to arrange myself a visa to live in the Philippines without concern, and I was really settling into expat life perfectly. I had joined a dating site. I'd been on a few dates, although nothing ever serious came of any of those dates. but I was quite comfortable in the knowledge that I had moved to the perfect place for me. After those 3 months, I did think it was time to go and explore more of the country. It was my plan at that moment to base myself in Dumaguete and then travel places from there. I had more than enough money to be able to spend to do that, but I just couldn't go crazy or stay in the nicest places or eat the most expensive food. But I was never bothered about things like that. I was just happy that I was retired and living a great life. I went to Cebu for my first trip. I had a date arranged, should I say 2 dates with 2 girls arranged, and I wanted to go there and visit. I got the ferry across, which I found to be a very fun experience, and I went to check into a hotel in Cebu. I was staying in downtown because I wanted to be close to the nightlife because that was something I was enjoying, although where I was living it wasn't as extreme as many places, but I didn't need it to be where I lived. I enjoyed Cebu, went on those 2 dates, but nothing came of them. Enjoyed the nightlife, spent time with other girls, but I'm still not finding anyone yet. But I don't think I'm in a rush. My last evening in Cebu, I was sitting, having a drink somewhere, waiting for my meal to arrive, and I just had this thing come over me like I just wanted to go back to Angeli's. I was meant to be returning to Dumaguete the following day, but in the spur of the moment, which would later come back to haunt me, I decided I would go to Angeli's for a week and then return to Dumaguete from there. I think the decision I still regret to this day. I have to chalk it up as being the most ruinous decision I ever made, because about 10 minutes before I made that decision, the thought to go there hadn't crossed my mind. I was ready to enjoy the rest of the evening and return home the following day. But now, I unwittingly started the path towards my downfall. I had decided to fly into Manila first, was going to spend a few days there before getting the bus to Angeli's. Nothing happened in Manila, apart from me enjoying myself, but when I got to Angeli's, I felt like I made the right decision, because I was ready to go and enjoy the bars, because there was something about the party scene in Angeli's that I found addictive. Days after arriving, I was in a bar, quite close to the end of Walking Street, the bar I'd never been in before, and I met a girl, which wasn't different to the nights before, at least to start with, but the more I spoke to her, the more we drank, and after we left and went for something to eat and more to drink, I just felt like the conversations I was having with her were so different to the ones I had with girls that I'd met in other bars. I know, I said there was no chance I would ever meet a girl in a bar for a serious relationship, but during that first evening with her, I'd convinced myself that I was going to make an exception just for her. I needed to make sure that she felt the same way. The thing was, it seemed like she did. The following morning, she told me that she can't believe that she met me. She can't believe that we crossed paths because she felt like it was fate. I felt exactly the same way about her, and the fact that she said it before me made me think like it must be real. She was 20 years old, which was perfect, I thought. How lucky was I to have a girl who was 20 fall in love with me, because this was the stuff dreams were made of. A week later, she hadn't left my side, and I'm still in Angeli's, even though I was meant to have left by now. I had my rent due for the place I was living in, and I couldn't pay by bank transfer or by any other means apart from cash to the landlord, so I knew I needed to get back there within 5 days. I didn't want to leave. I wanted to be with her. When I told her that I needed to leave soon, she said, "I will go with you if you want." Of course I wanted her to go with me, so she did. When I left Angeli's and she was with me, that was one of the best feelings I felt in the Philippines. I'd ignored all my own warnings to myself, all my own advice about not meeting a girl in a bar, and I was travelling to Dumaguete with what I thought was a 1 in a million bar girl that eluded everyone else. I always felt that there were exceptions to prove rules, and she most definitely, in that moment, was the exception, because when I was with her, it didn't feel like any of the other girls that worked in the bars that I spent time with. All the other girls, you could see that they were only interested in money. You could see that they only wanted to improve their station in life. Yet this girl seemed to just want to please, which was very important to me. That's what I always was after. A girl who just wanted to please, who in return wouldn't have to work like that anymore, and who would be happy living a more dignified life. I thought it was a fantastic trade-off, and I did make that the exception to her. But I suppose that I would say to anybody is don't make an exception for anybody, even if they don't work in a bar. because life changes when things become about anything other than just you. At the time, though, I was throwing myself headfirst into this relationship. By the time we got to Dumaguete, I felt like we were made for each other and like I'd known her forever. It was like I completely pushed the thought of what happened to my friend with his unsuccessful bar-girl relationship to the back of my mind and was doing everything I could to tie myself to this girl. Not literally, but after she was only with me for a month back in Dumaguete, I felt like she was an integral part of my life. That if she wasn't with me anymore, it would make my whole experience worse. I don't know if this was by design on her part. It was as if she could see how infatuated I was with her, and the only thing I can really think about looking back at that moment was like she could sense that, and she kept trying to get away with ever so slight changes as the days went by. I wasn't picking up on these changes at the time. If anything, I just thought this was the natural progression of a relationship, but just how suddenly things changed, which I didn't even pay attention to, is very alarming to think about as I reminisce. What I mean by that are those tiny changes that you don't notice, but it's sudden at the same time. And she did it in a way that meant I had no chance and things could only get worse. The saddest thing is, though, life was great. Or was it just a question of me believing that this life was how I thought it was, and still believing that she was exactly like I thought she was, and that she would never change? So as time is going by, and I'm getting even more connected to her, when the relationship changes from me just giving her a small amount of money to make sure that she still had some available if she went out for food, maybe occasional money sent back to her family, that warped into me agreeing to give her a monthly allowance after she'd been with me for 3 months. It started at $300 a month, yet another 3 months later, it's now $600 a month, and it was like I knew this wasn't beneficial to me, but she always had a way to justify needing more money. I've already convinced myself that this relationship is exactly the relationship I want and need. I convinced myself that she is the girl that I need and the girl that is a 1 in a million who isn't with me for any other reason than love. Why I couldn't pick up on the fact that as time went by and I'm giving more money to her, not to mention on top of that $600 she's getting after she's been with me for 6 months, I'm also spending the same again on little things for her every time she asks when we go out. The very fact I was able to justify this with myself as being the early stage of the relationship, this is not who she is really, but this is just what's happening right now, kind of thinking it's going to get to the point in time when she stops asking for anything because she understands that she's already had too much. Then it's time for her to put in the effort to make sure that she helps me to just live this amazing life I need to live with her by my side. I know that's very insane to think about, but that's what I was thinking. And I guess after she'd been with me for a year, she'd gone to visit her family 3 times during that year, but aside from that, she was always with me. That's when I felt like it was time to ask her to marry me, because I'm noticing how much money I've spent being with her. I also think marriage will make her understand that it's better if she doesn't spend any money at all, because as a married couple and as a family unit, the existence of that family unit long into the future should be the most important thing. I still hadn't picked up on the fact that money was the most important thing for her. It was the second most important, the third most important, and it was everything for her. For me, the relationship, being able to survive for the long haul, was the most important thing. And I thought that was the most important thing for anybody in a relationship. And when she agreed to get married to me, I felt like I was the luckiest guy in the world. I failed to think about the fact that I'd probably spent close to $30,000 extra on her ever since I was with her. Sometimes convincing myself when we went out to eat a meal together and she paid, with money I gave her, that was the same as her paying with her own money. It's very scary what you find yourself doing. I don't know why I managed to convince myself that I was doing something right, because I wasn't really at all. I was throwing away my life, but I thought she looked up to me. I didn't think I was better than her, I just thought that she thought that I was better than her, and I wanted to try and prove to her that I wasn't. Maybe that's why I did what I did. In an ideal world, she wouldn't have wanted anything other than to have been taken care of and looked after and respected. I thought that's all somebody who was poor would want, but I was wrong, and when we agreed to get married, I thought that was proof that I needed that she was who I thought she was. Before I tell you exactly what happened, The reason I wanted to share my story and the reason I think it's so important for people to share their stories is because when you're doing something with a certain understanding about what you're actually doing. You're doing something on the basis of what you think it is. As far as I was concerned, because I was the one with the money, because I was the one paying for everything, because I was the one responsible for this relationship being able to survive for the long haul, I thought I was the most important part of the relationship. I thought she thought the same thing. And honestly, that year we spent together, where I spent so much money, I thought that was her way in proving to herself that I was right for her. And now we're getting married, she would stop completely with any asks or requests, because if the most important thing was making sure our relationship lasted, the best way for her to do that is not to spend money, to spend a normal amount. I thought that was so obvious that I didn't even talk with her about it, because my mind didn't work in a way where anything other than that would be the truth. This is a really big warning to any other guy out there. Being able to survive for the long haul, making sure your money stretches as far as you need it to, doesn't play any part in the thought process of a person you're in a relationship with. For her, it's always now, want, more. That is what's the most important thing, even though it means that as any money problems may occur in the future, it's going to make her have a worse position in life then. It's like they don't care. It's because they've never had money before, I think. They've never saved before. They've never understood about sacrificing now for the future before. It's always been about being poor forever and the ability to not be poor in the moment. It's more important than making sure you're not poor in the future. This is the most important thing I want anybody to take from my story. It's a different world out there, a different mentality out there. Putting your own Western logic on things makes sense to you, and probably to most of the people in the country who have things. Yet it doesn't make sense to people who never had things, because in the moment it's more important than the future. Now that's out of the way, I will tell you exactly what happened from here, because it's alarming how quickly things went downhill. Because we were going to be getting married, that meant we would go and visit her family. I really wanted to be introduced to them because I hadn't seen them yet, and I was excited to see where she came from, because as of yet I hadn't been anywhere too rural. She was from an island called Leyte. At the time, I didn't know that was a very common place where girls who worked in the bars in Angeles came from. That was something I found out a lot later on, but that was where we were going to see her family. It was quite a convoluted journey to get there, but fun nonetheless, to see different places in the Philippines. The thing I wasn't expecting was just how primitive her family's house was. Their living conditions were so much worse than I thought possible, and I was quite shocked to see how she lived when she was younger, which I was told was even worse than the current conditions I was seeing. Her family were very friendly. One thing that was very clear, that I definitely didn't pick up on at the time, was just how important elevating her family's life was, even if that meant it was detrimental to her own life and to mine. I suppose because it's very different to how things are at home. It's a different type of struggle that people are facing, but I didn't pick up on that. When we'd been there for a few hours and done all the introductions, and she talked about how it was always her dream to be able to help her family improve their house, fix a few of the problems, make it more comfortable, I felt very proud of her for having those dreams, not understanding that those dreams she was having would be at my expense. I didn't offer her family any money, but one she said to me was, would it be okay, as a wedding present, if I gave her family $10,000? I agreed, like an idiot. When we returned to Dumaguete, we hadn't yet picked a date for the wedding, but I really felt in that moment a bigger connection to her. What happened not long after this, though, was another request for money for her family, this time $7,000, because the $10,000 wasn't enough for what they were doing, even though they said it was going to be, and this was just to tie up loose ends. Again, the fact that I didn't see this as anything more than what it was, which was just a way to get more money out of me, is very scary, because ever since I'd been with her, the amount of money I spent on her and now her family, we're talking about a multiple years' living expenses. But I'm doing it thinking that once we're married, I will be firmly in control, and all of this will stop. Perhaps that's what I wanted to happen, and what I convinced myself would happen. But even after giving that money, and when we arranged a date for the wedding in 6 months' time, things kept happening, and I'm getting very concerned about how much money is going down. I'm trying to tell myself it's okay, because once we're married, this will stop. but I probably handed over another $20,000 for various things during those 6 months. Then, when we get to those 6 months, the wedding is postponed because of some issues with the family. At this point, I should have been alarmed. About half of what I arrived in the Philippines with has gone, and I'm not picking up on it, which is the worst of it. I'm not even understanding what I'm doing here, which is crazy. The fact that the wedding is postponed and I'm handing over money for other things, again, I'm not noticing it. But when that date came and that was postponed, I started to get concerned. When I started to actually understand things, it was only because I was out one evening by myself. I didn't go out very often, but I wanted to get away and try to work out what was going on. That was when I ran into a guy who I'd become quite friendly with, yet not friendly enough to talk about personal things, but I just felt like I had to talk to someone. I hadn't spoken to anybody, didn't have anybody to speak to who was from where I was from or who was from the West. When I told him about it, saying I just can't wait to get married so that this can stop, he looked at me like, "Don't you know what's going on here? The wedding is postponed, money is going out, what do you expect to happen? Can't you see this for what it is, which is just a way to get money out of you?" But I didn't see it that way. But the more he explained that this is what he thought, and this is what happened in the Philippines to many people, that was when I was starting to add up everything and starting to think, is this actually what she's doing? Is she just trying to get money out of me until I stop giving money, and then we're not going to get married anyway, and everything will have been for nothing? That's what it seemed like was the case here, and how I didn't pick up on that until I had to be told, I have no idea. But as soon as that became a possibility, I couldn't unsee the possibility. That was a difficult thing. I couldn't think about anything other than this. It was just a question of trying to find out the truth. Sure enough, a few days later, there was another request for money. I'd always given in before, always given money, thinking that this was going to be the last time, and when we get married I will have control again. But this time, I just felt like I couldn't say yes because it was $5,000. I can't even remember what this amount was for because there were so many, and I said I can't really afford this to her, and I want to get married and I want to move ahead with our lives, and I need to stop giving money to you. She didn't immediately complain, but it was plain as day how much more distant she became. When I agreed to give her money before, she'd always come and hug me. She would always basically do everything that I thought a wife like that would do, or a girlfriend at the time. But it was clear that she wasn't going to do that now, and I suppose that was when I knew that I'd been played all along. The following morning, things were a lot clearer though, because she came to me and started hugging me in a way that I always liked her to do, but she kind of stopped and tried to make a stronger justification for this $5,000. We're talking in pesos together. I'm only using dollars because that seems to be the most common spoken about currency, and we're talking pesos. And she's telling me how many pesos she needs. She was really trying to justify the need for this, and as much as I wanted to agree to give it to her, I wanted to see what would happen if I said I'm sorry. I have to stick to my guns and say no. She wasn't very good at not getting what she wanted, because when I said no, she immediately moved away from me and said, "No problem, don't worry about it," and walked out of the bedroom, and okay, now I knew the truth. Unfortunately, I can't leave things there, because although I'm understanding now that money is very important to her, I'm still thinking that she's going to come round and understand that just having large amounts of money all the time isn't possible. Perhaps sometime that day, she would talk to me and say, "Okay, I understand, I'm not going to ask anymore. Our relationship and seeing our relationship achieve its full potential is more important." So instead of packing my bags and escaping the situation like I should have done, I just continued. We're still okay together, and I'm shocked about how much money I spent, because I have spent so much. But the most difficult thing to admit to comes now. About a month later, she called me after she'd been out, saying that she doesn't think the relationship can last anymore. She doesn't really want to be with me, and it was a mistake, so we're not going to get married. That made it worse, of course, because all that money was for nothing, and the bit I'd been trying to avoid talking about was the joint account that we had together, which at that moment probably had about $25,000 in it or equivalent. When she said that, that's when I went to take the money out, but she beat me to it. She emptied the account of all the money. When I called her saying, "Can I have it back?" she said, "No, it's mine," and okay, that was the stupid mistake. I mean, it was idiotic to do that, and it was a loss. That relationship cost me so much money. It only hit me then, though, how much I actually spent and how much I wasted when she told me that she didn't want the relationship to continue. That's when it hit me that I've spent all that money on this relationship with a girl that you met in a bar in Angeles City on the understanding that you thought you were going to get married, and when you were married, she would all of a sudden change and be exactly like you wanted her to be for the rest of your life. It's crazy how your mind can play tricks on you and how you can do things so insane, but that's what I did. I should be thankful that I didn't lose all my money, that I didn't even have enough money to continue living in the Philippines. It was just as if, because I was happy in the moment, I completely forgot about the future and pushed forward with these feelings I was having. I lasted another week in the Philippines. Knowing I couldn't live there forever, I knew I had to leave, so I went home. When I was returning home, that's when the gravity of the situation hit me. In less than 2 years, I spent such a ridiculous amount of money on a fantasy. I thought I was trying to get to a point in time where this girl that I loved more than anything would just be that. This amazing wife who was happy to be taken care of. I saw everything before getting married as her just trying to confirm that this was right for her. I thought she was of the understanding that when we were married, she would be exactly like I needed her to be. I returned home with around £68,000. Everything else was wasted. Everything else gone in such a short amount of time because of my own stupidity and my own desire to have something that I thought I deserved. I think that's the thing. I thought I deserved an amazing wife who I would treat right, who I could love and who I could respect, and who in return would do exactly the same to me. That's what I got wrong. Maybe I respected her too much. Maybe I loved her too much. Maybe I thought that we shared the same dreams. Yet she had one dream and I had another. Her dream was to get as much money out of me as possible. My dream was to be in a loving, long-term relationship with someone who put me first and who didn't want money. That's the difference, and I only found out when it was too late. Since then, I haven't really been able to rebuild my finances. I gambled everything on the Philippines and the gamble didn't work. And although I'm surviving and getting by, I just wish that things had gone like I wanted them to have gone. That's the only thing I wish I could change. I wish I was still there now, married to her, and she was who I wanted her to be and who I thought she was. But it didn't work that way, and I would say to anybody trying to do the same thing, it's most likely not going to work for you too, and I found that out when it was already too late.